Hi there, time for another video. As always, I think about, yeah, okay, this is my concern. Is really how I should approach these type of videos, as usually I just put on record and start without much thought before, but what really concerns me is still how I speak and what I speak of, and I tend to go back to this because I think it's important. And yes, and I want to talk more about what we should do. It's a very broad question, but if I start with where we are in society today, in how I would perceive it and how I think it's an accurate way of viewing it, I think that the general case is quite accurate, described by Peter Thiel, and that's he has some views on it, and he is obviously to some people somewhat controversial, but I don't think I will touch on the his most controversial topics, although I will hint on them sometimes, because it sometimes overlaps with what I think. Some things really is almost at the core of what I believe, even though I don't necessarily can say that I support everything he says, just by the simple fact that I haven't. It's not necessarily that I disagree or agree. It's just that I don't have a specific opinion and I haven't thought enough about the subject. And what I will start to say is that he's concerned with. He's quite critical about the universities, even though I think he's have the mutual opinion with me that it's crucial for our society and very important places, and he thinks that the world and universities in general are stagnating. and this is not exactly my opinion, but he lays it forth like this, that we had a rapid growth in the hard sciences from, I would guess he would say, from the 50s and maybe to the 60s. I think that wasn't, or if it was to the end of the 60s, yeah. That's really when it started to slow down. And we have, since then, have a fake growth, so to speak. That's what he labels it as. And what he means by that, well, he gets into the economic ideas of what is growth. You have real growth, you have nominal growth, and you have inflation. If you mix with the inflation number, you get other. And I won't go into that, but the overall concept when he says fake growth is that it is our expectations of growth in absence of growth becomes fake growth, because we still believe that it's happening and we believe that things are getting better, even though, as makes an example of how different things was in the beginning of the 50s and the end of the 60s, and now it is, except for the phone, which is a huge difference, it's still in the in the physical world. It's not really. He says we were promised flying cars, and what we got was 140 characters. Implying Twitter, even though he's not necessarily critical of Twitter. He thinks it's a good company, but it's not really something that happened in the physical world. And so, yeah, in comparison to that, flying cars, we're quite far away, and we in his perspective, there's not that much that has happened, even though we tend to. And my view on this is, I don't have that perspective. I'm quite young compared to him, and it seems reasonable, and I want to believe it's true just because I love acceleration of human progress in technological and in intellectual pursuit. Progress in that respect is what I find to be the only real purpose of human existence, to search to be better. And that may sound, or you could definitely disagree with that if you want to, but that's another separate discussion. But what I want to talk about here is universities and businesses in general too, but it also is about, and it goes hand in hand with what I presented before, my ideas around, I think it's a Swedish one though, but the concept of just searching for something meaningful together with other people, but because I think that religion and our evolutionary environment have fostered us to really shaped our brains to, or I should be more specific, the evolution has shaped our brains in a way that makes us search commonality and somewhat congruent picture of the world. And it has been religion, and it has just been a means for cooperation, because if I say stone, and in your mind you think about tree, then when I say well, you start running when I pass the stone, in order for us to get down the mammoth, we won't be able to cooperate in a way that would be necessary, because you would interpret the stone as a tree, and that's not according to the plan, and so forth. So that the words is similar and our worldview is similar, and I've gone through this before, but the thing is about it that religion is one. It connects, not to say that it is true or not true, it just connects common worldview with other, you could say, necessities of human life, like for example purpose and direction, something to hold on to, and something to feel a commonality with other people, which I think is really essential in human nature and existence. One could argue that what we have today in a secular society is science as our religion, even though I won't go as far to say that that's actually true, because you can't say that science is a religion among others if you have a objective, purely empirical worldview, but it still serves a function to guide our thinking. I think that is crucial to how we work as humans. We have a common outlook on life, which is today very much based on science, and that's maybe true that it is something objective, but but what's my general point? It's that in order for us to cooperate, and in order for us to well, let me start on the other end, because that's just repetition of what I said earlier. But what is new now, or at least I want to discuss again, is how that relates to today and what we make of our lives. Because I think I mentioned it before, that I think it's crucial to have a connection to what you think is purposeful and what you do with your life, and even what you do to work, that you spend 8 hours a day to do. And also at universities, of course, in education, it's also, I think, necessary to have a connection to that. But what I think is lacking, and I think is really what is the same thing as Peter Thiel thinks, is that there's a lack of agency in respect to the way I would frame it is it's a lack of agency because we don't have, partly on an individual level, we don't have a view of what we want to do with life that is bold, that is, I think that it was much more in the culture in the 20th century, maybe early, and even centuries before that, that you thought that due to these scientific opportunities that where you could do extraordinary things. But as Thiel said, the last 50, 60 years, it's not really that it has happened that much, at least 50 years, 30, 50 years. And my view on it is that is partly because things are so big now, like the universities, and it's not really that sense of that you have an opportunity to explore something and really change something in the world. And partly because so many, you think there are so many people, how could I? And it's not as unique to go to a university anymore because so many people are doing it, and you don't really think that you can do some breakthrough, because you really don't feel that unique, even though you may go to a really good university. I think it's not anymore the sense that I will do a huge breakthrough, or that I will. And I also think it's a lack of, and it's connected to this, there's a lack of belief in, one thing is the beliefs in that you could do something extraordinary, something new. The other thing is that do you really have any idea of what we could create, flying cars, or even if that may not motivate you, but I've tried to find some topic that might motivate people that they're not necessarily looking for yet, or they haven't mentioned. I'm no claim to say that it's good ones. It's just something I've picked up and that I think motivates people. Like, for example, I think many guys are motivated by Elon Musk, what he's doing. He's actually trying to go to space, even to Mars. And I think that motivates people. I think that's why he's so popular among many people, because he's actually doing something new. He's creating Tesla, he's creating SpaceX. And another example would be also a thing that because this thing, an essential element in it is that it has to be quite exceptional, because if it's not exceptional or bold, then it's not motivating. And also, of course, it have to be valuable. But sometimes the valuable thing is just to do something extraordinary too. So it's but my next thing I think is really valuable, and that's about the diseases of aging. Let's say cancer, for example, and going back to if someone thinks that there's a stagnation, I just want to be clear, I'm not certain that's the case, because I don't know enough to say that there's a stagnation, as people say. But if that's true, it for example brings up when was it Kennedy who declared that we would be on the moon at the end of the decade, and in the 60s, and the US got there. And when Nixon, this is an American perspective, but I think it applies for most of the world. And when Nixon said he declared war on cancer, it's past, I think it was 39 years ago, and we'll still not solve that issue. Like so cancer and how it's pronounced in English, arthritis, you get in your skeleton in your bones, and so you've seen it in old people. They fumble with their fingers and so forth. It's not very pleasant. And all these issues, and Alzheimer and Parkinson's, all these diseases of old age, it's not only that it is certainly an altruistic and good, valuable thing to do for the world to find, because people die in cancer when they're young too, but and so it's not just good for the old, it's good for other people. But what even more motivating for some people, because that's the ethical foundation for it, it's good. But the other thing is that you would it's quite obvious to say that we would live much longer if we didn't have these diseases, because one argument put forth is that all the diseases of old age, we have separated them and thought of them as part of natural aging, natural dying, as it's something natural to die. And even though it might sound for some people too bold to say, but one way of looking at it is that we are out to defeat aging and even death. And yeah, I know that sounds bold to some people. What could I live forever? That's quite often. But just think about living to 120 or 150. Who knows what's possible? And if we look from the scientific worldview, there's nothing to hinder us to think about the human body as a machine really, who decays, and that it's possible to upgrade it. And there's certainly many difficulties with the human body as a very complex machine, but it's still, from a scientific perspective, it's still a machine that you can alter and make better or worse. And of course, it's some philosophical, ethical dilemmas about mixing with DNA and so forth, but that's not necessarily necessary for curing cancer or other diseases of old age. And so that's one other, so space is one, beating aging and diseases that are devastating for our well-being. And another thing could just be, and this is quite a broad one, but I think it's a good one to bring forth, because yes, I'm just trying to push on motivating buttons for different people. And if we don't bring forth these visions and clear things worth to strive for, I think we will just fall into decay and not find that inspiring motivation that is necessary for humans to really be happy. I think that's it's a mistake not to try to strive for that. And okay, so my third one is just simply human happiness. What if we could cure human suffering? What if we could avoid it? What if we could find out? And it's incredibly hard. I mean, Buddha tried, from a philosophical / religious perspective, but still, human suffering is not really something good. I mean, it is not. And it doesn't matter how hard the question is, it's still a noble question to try to answer. And it's troubled people for so long. And just because something is hard, it's not to say that it's not worth pursuing or worth solving. And into this comes the economic perspective also, because it's hard to validate. Like, for example, one way of you looking at it is that money flows from, well, it could be that it's a private university or that it's a public one. But nevertheless, the money goes to the university in different ways. And it's one of the issues is valuing how good is the university, what is it doing with its money, what do we get out of it in terms of making it better for people, because that's the ultimate. Well, why would we put money into an institution if it was not worth it? And so it's worth investigating, but it's also worth considering. It's hard to measure. It's extremely hard to measure if something is good and bad. So just to say that universities are bad because of X is often a faulty argument, in the same way as saying that universities are good because of Y, because most of the time we don't get the whole picture, because we can't really evaluate. And that's what Peter Thiel's thesis is, that even though he would agree with what I said, he suspects that universities are not doing what they should be doing, or at least that they are not as good as they want to be perceived. And that's connected with fake growth, because fake growth is maybe even the whole part of it is that we portray things as being in growth, and that's how we keep our positions in society. Because if you're a president of a university, or if you're a CEO, or if you're a political leader, you don't want to be at the top and hear that the world is stagnating. So people in power won't necessarily like that view. I'm not to say that I, as I said, or know what the case is, but what was I thinking about universities and so forth? They get money, and the reason for it being good, what was I? Well, I guess I was trying to, sorry for losing my train of thought here, but I'm terribly sorry, but what I tried to, because I was thinking about, I thought about these issues as going to space, be death, or diseases, or striving for happiness. Usually we do these things partly in the universities, partly in businesses, and that's really the two ways we have to do how we finance things. It could be, especially earlier in time, there are a lot of people who did these type of things without necessarily, I don't know about the Wright brothers who invented in some way the airplane. I don't know if they were, maybe they were on a university, I don't know, but I think it's certainly safe to say that that's not always been. But now, because things are so complex, it's often at the universities and in some businesses. That's where the value is, producing innovation, basically. Innovation that makes us happier, that makes us better off. And so the question is, if something is worth investing in, like for example a university, because that's an investment from the government side or from the university itself. If that's a good thing to invest in, it's because it is good if the outcome is, and as I said, it's hard to measure and but the key point here is that when I say we should strive for happiness, or we should try to find this objective sort of, so if you accept those philosophical assumptions of objective world and so forth, then we should strive for happiness. It's quite obvious, and it's quite obvious that we should strive for curing diseases of old age and other diseases, of course. And it's also, and you could incorporate under happiness, you could incorporate eradicated poverty or other things. It really depends on how you're wired. But my parallel to the universities here is my way of saying that investments, sorry for making this complicated and not getting to the point, but my point is that how can I justify a vision about these things without really explaining how the economic process is going to work and how the financial process is going to work? And that's something I actually I ponder. And I think what I have been I think the starting point as any idea worth developing is to develop the idea. And if the idea is going to be fruitful and adhered to, then it is something that is good. If it's fruitful, meaning it, and not only fruitful, not just that it spreads, but that it's actually good for people. And one of the ideas is that people should try to pursue things more on their own, and not just following the crowd, even though the crowd goes to Harvard or to Stockholm School of Economics or other elite kind of places. And even though that could be a good thing, it's still that you have to, in my opinion, do something extra in order to really make innovation something new, because it's really hard to define innovation, what's new. But I think in order to do this, you have to have these visions. Like I tried to give some example of what could be motivating, and so my point here is, if a person in their everyday life are not exposed to the possibility of contemplating what could I do with my life that would be really impactful, then they will never try. And that's why I try to air these ideas, because I think people like Einstein is an obvious example. If you read a biography, it's what's it called, Walter Isaacson is quite one of the recent and good one about Einstein I just read, and he's really much for independence of thought and not adhering too much to authority and developing you really should, even though you should respect authority. He not said that explicitly, but I think it to some degree you should still try to, if you're only following, you're not going to developing something. You're not going to develop something new. And so creating a space of new ideas that could be starting a business or starting anything that is good and have a chance of, for example, eradicating. And it doesn't have to be a business. It could be you go into university, like doing science. But if we don't have people that get into, say, for example, biomedicine, if they don't go in there, if no one is going into that field with the intention of I am going to cure cancer, I am going to cure Parkinson, and I will do whatever it takes to cure that. If we don't have those type of people, then we will never, ever solve this issue. If we don't have a person like Elon Musk that said the best way to increase the possibility of the human species survival is to go to Mars and make it an whether that's true or not, if we assume that's true, it's really good that someone actually thinks that he has to do it. And I think that's quite. Since this is a monologue, I don't know what to expect for counter argument, but for me it seems quite obvious that people striving for that have a huge strive and huge sense of purpose. This is what I meant to do, and this is what I want to do because I want to make the world a better place. If we have those people, then that's so enormously valuable. And if we don't let people think in those thoughts and are just stuck on the track on getting a degree and just then get a job that is good paid and so forth, I'm not saying that's a bad path. I'm just saying that if everyone does that and not pursue innovation that will change our society, then we won't get a change. And I also think that there are so many people out there, because it's the conventional to be conventional, but by definition. But I also think that if more people would be bold enough to strike out on their own path and But doesn't necessarily have to be taking huge amount of risk. I mean, if you're really dedicated to a field and just think biomedicine is interesting, then why shouldn't you think what I can do with this is actually cure a disease, and I'm actually determined to do it. And I think that type of agency and determination is what I think have to be aired and put forward, and just think that make people believe that these type of things are possible. If no one thinks like this, I try to think like this, and I'm trying to consider myself not long ago to go into biomedicine, for example, to try to cure the ages of diseases of old age. And I've contemplated to, for time at least, just shortly, to get into physics and try to, but I tried to evaluate my strengths and so forth, and even though I've been terribly good at math, I made the I wouldn't bet on me being the next Einstein. I can't know for sure, and it's probably narcissistic of me to think that I would do it. One side of me says that I don't want to think like that. I want to think that I actually have the possibility to solve it, but I also have a really realistic mind. But I think it's good in one sense that I don't want to accept that, because that's a fundamental piece of thought in your brain that will enable you to do something extraordinary. I think more people have to, not saying that I have the right outlook, but this is an outlook that I do think is accurate, and I would love to be challenged on it if there are good arguments against it, but I think it's really essential to believe that you have the possibility of doing something, to sound cliche, sound like quite cliche, but to do something great. But you can also say, just do something good for the world. That's not, if you're more skeptical to people who strive for greatness and associate that with greed, you could just say, what if someone cured cancer? That's a good thing to do, and no one would say that it's bad. Really, if you cure cancer, it's marvelous. And so yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I want to go back to this again, because I think it's so underestimated to think that you can actually accomplish something extraordinary, something really, really good. And half of that is the motivation, and just thinking that it's possible. Half of it is probably ability and so forth. And you of course you should, if you've never been really good at something, you maybe shouldn't contemplate to think that you're the person who's going to do everything, but you can still be a contributing factor to it. It's still like, yeah, I think that's true. And so developing this argument a bit further in respect to how that process should look like to get people, because it's not just about airing the ideas, because in the end most of us are people getting ideas from the internet now in these days, and getting ideas from the internet is not necessarily the same thing as changing one's life. I think many people get new ideas from the internet, but not necessarily implement their ideas in conjunction with their relationships, or their relationship to school, or their relationship to industry and their work, because the ideas does not come from the same place as the people you work with, and you're not necessarily incorporating the ideas in your life in that sense that it would be best. Because if the ideas are on a separate place from where you are physically with your people, you could, the more you speak about it, the more you can implement it, and you can, but it's a barrier there to get exposed to new ideas and implementing and do something different. And I think what is crucial for many young people today, because I think young people are more into the internet. I think that's quite obvious, even though older people are too. But the younger you are, the more adapted to it, so to speak. From a younger age you are, and you're just into it. And a crucial point here, I think, is that we stop to those who haven't following and those who produce content. I think it's necessary for those, anyone really, who produce content, to actually try to make something out of it, in the sense that if you're going to do something extraordinary, if you're going to do something new, I think there's far too many people who produce content without, sometimes it's obviously impossible to communicate with everyone, but I think it's an essential element of, it's not just throwing the ideas out there, it's also incorporating the ideas with those people. So it's really about building relationships, and I think that's one thing that is lacking. Even though a lot of people are producing a lot of content, a lot of people are commenting and maybe even developing relationships, I still think there's a huge part of people, of the population, who are only consuming and not integrating the ideas to their lives, or establishing relationships that will actually, like for example, if you're like Silicon Valley is a place where a lot of innovation, technological innovation, and in especially in computer science and so forth, and half of the thing is the connections there, and the internet is contributing to us tremendously. But I also think that many people it's a barrier between consuming content and actually developing relationship. But the only thing we see on the internet is the relationship building, or the content we see other people produce. But my hypothesis is that most people are not producing that much, and they're just consuming the information. They scroll into Facebook, they look at YouTube videos, they are not really engaging and making relationships, and making so one of my concerns, and what I actually think is necessary for developing these great visions, is not only talking about it, but actually get people that are onto the idea to meet and develop these ideas further, and really, because that's that's why I mentioned Silicon Valley, because that's really, you meet at that place and you actually start, you say, it's incredible due to the networking effects. So if you're there, or at Stanford, let's say, which is close, you get around people that are, and you get be able to build relationships that will develop into ideas. And I don't think you could do some things on your own, but for example, in like Silicon Valley, I think it's really great to have, first of all, motivating people go there, and they meet and they develop their ideas. But now on the internet, there's an opportunity to go to get really ambitious people that want to change something for the better, to actually meet, not just and I'm not sure there probably are, but I think that we need more places where really high ambitions for doing great things for society. I think there has to be more of it. And to be honest, I don't think I can't think of places. Maybe I'm just stumbled on it, but I can't think of places that I think are to a necessary degree wanting really ambitious people doing something really, really great, and actually meet and do it. Actually meeting and or doing it. That's what I think is lacking. So it's really making a bridge between just trying to get followers, just trying to speak, to actually do something with those people. And yeah, but that's quite far into the future sometime, and I'm not sure how that is going to look like. And I think it's happening everywhere, like in more trivial gatherings, like for example music. For example, I love music, but it's not but it's still trivial in comparison maybe to really changing the world for the better. Obviously it's not a critique of music. As I said, I love music, and I don't want to say that it's less valuable that people go into music, but my focus here is on really such things that will, yeah, I think you get my point. But what is then the first step to establishing that? I think that more people who really have high ambitions, and really, I hesitate to say high ambitions because this is not necessarily about greed, but people who are really, really motivated to do something big with their lives. I think these people have to meet, and I think there is a lack of space for these type of people, because kind of by definition they are rare, and they are also, but at the same time I think we can awaken more people that are like that. And it maybe I won't say everyone is like that or have that part of. Some people are really good at just maintaining what is, and that's as valuable as creating something new. And so not every person is probably fit to do that, but I also think there are a lot of people that are in a slumber, in an ambitious slumber, or in a well, I don't get a better word for it, but because there are a lot of ambitious people that are, but they are not necessarily striving to make something really extraordinary. Really, they're maybe just after money, or they are after being at a great company, and that could be a good solution for sure. But I also think that trying to develop really breakthrough projects are, yeah, I think it is we're so deeply drilled, what's the word, focused on just the here and now, especially talented people who go into education and then are trying to get a really good job and so forth. They're so stuck in the process that they forget to think about what could really change something, and they don't get, like Einstein said, he said at one point he said imagination is more important than knowledge, and what a point he said, I don't remember the exact word, but to abundance of content should not limit, what was it, should not limit individual investigation or something like that. So if you're just only acquiring knowledge without trying to think for yourself and produce something new, then you won't have that big breakthrough. You will be less great, so to speak, or less have less influence in society for something good than if you actually do that you think for yourself and you try to create something new, something really new. And so yeah, I think that's what's lacking in society to a really high degree. Too many people are just following the crowd, even those people who are so ambitious and actually want to do something different, and they get derailed because since there are so many people who are really talented, they just, all the talented people are kind of just don't know where to go, and they don't really think they can do something extraordinary because they have evidence of there are so many other people that are extraordinary in. And I want to say I've just been in mental ability to my like in math, for example. I think it's quite safe to argue that some people are better in math than others. So yeah, really high talented people are in math or physics are more probable to solve this problem. But when, as I said, if they're only if they don't think it's possible for them to do something extraordinary new, and the only way to achieve something is just learning without thinking, even though, because it's dangerous to say that knowledge is not important, because it's incredibly important, but that is independence of thought also. So yeah, I think we need more people who can kind of make a connection in this, bring really talented people together and create something extraordinary, something really good for the society. And so one way I'm actually bringing this up is because of, as I said, bringing these ideas forth, because not enough people are thinking about it and actually think it's possible. But I also think that we should be able to create a space for these type of people to make the connections to make it possible. And the internet provides us with huge, enormous potential for doing this, because the world is huge and everyone connected is a huge opportunity for connecting. I don't know what to say except for great minds, because, and I definitely not want to exclude people who don't think of themselves as having a great mind, or don't think they have mental aptitude. It's hard to go into the IQ debate, but I think it's quite safe to say that there are abilities that are not. You could talk about different mental or intellectual abilities, or what's it called, intelligences. That's one theory. You said 7 intelligences or something like that. By that, I forgot the name of him developing them, but I still think there are a huge, like for example, if you're a person that makes people feel good, you really make people feel good and get other people motivating, then that's an extraordinary important role, for example, in a business, even maybe potentially in a startup. But and also whatever idea, if you think something is extraordinarily important and you don't think that you necessarily have the potential for be a key person in developing that, I still think if you're motivated enough to be a part of it and making those connections, I think it's possible to in some way contribute to that. It could be just a small thing or a large thing. Most of the things are complex, and that requires mental ability, but then probably IQ and so forth. But that's not the only thing that is valuable in terms of making these cognitive tasks easier. Because if someone is really motivating, you can provide motivation for someone. That's a crucial role, and you might have other abilities. But it's also true that sometimes I think what's really motivating is not exactly what you're the best on, and you could try to modify in some way. But I still think it's like, even those people that I hear says that put most emphasis on learning and so forth, even those say that passion is sometimes more important than just mental brain power in terms of IQ and so forth. And I think that's true for many things, even though it's incredibly important. I still think, meaning intelligence, what you were given and so forth. I think there are half the battle is to just open the abilities, because it's really the same thing for those who have enormous aptitude and ability, because the reason they are not doing these extraordinary things is simply because they are limited in their minds and don't think it's so it's the same issue for highly privileged people with a lot of potential, and those who have less brain power, so to speak. It's still the same issue. Half of the battle for both of them is just thinking it's possible and trying to take concrete step towards a great vision that will make it better for other people in the end. And so, yeah, some things are unfair, but for example in ability, but oftentimes there are a lot of different abilities, and you're by huge probability you're above average on some of them, and that's where you should focus on, I guess. I'm not here to give life advice by any means, but that's the conclusion I've come to, and that's one of the reasons that I didn't focus on astrophysics, not necessarily or being the new Einstein, because I can't know for sure that that's the only thing I'm good at. I think I have other abilities that might make it, not to say that I have extraordinary abilities in other fields necessarily. I don't know. It's really hard to evaluate yourself. But I guess it, like for example, airing these type of ideas and thinking for yourself, that I've started to do more and more. But I've always have a tendency to try to not accept truth too easily. But and I had easy with math and so forth. But aside from just trying a lot, of course, that's half the game too. But so yeah, but it's not only your abilities, it's also what's happening in society today. Like for example, if I didn't think it was a problem with, like in the 50s, it would not necessarily be as fruitful to air on these type of ideas, but for probably many people were already doing it, and the mental agency to trying to create something was already there. I think, at least from Peter Thiel's argument, I would suppose that would be the case. And so yeah, that's my thought on that. And it feels quite good to air these ideas, because it's something that I'm not expressed, I think, as clearly as I've done in this video. And it's really the what I should put the emphasis. It's embarrassing this pronunciation. Emphasis. Yeah, put the emphasis on partly airing these ideas of trying to do something great, but maybe even more importantly, you try to provide, or just connecting with other people so that you can actually achieve it, because that's half the battle, to find the right members or people. Not to say members, don't want to exclude people, but it's still the case that some people get along better than others, and it's just I think that's an overarching thing in life in general, to find like-minded people and go after something. But I think too many people are passive in their striving for something different, because I think it's learned there somewhere in many people, but sometimes they don't have the means to take action, and they are so stuck up in what they're doing, and sometimes it's totally gone because they've forgotten that they have that type of personality, or maybe they don't have it at all, and they are much better at keeping things to work so that just society not just get destroyed. But yeah. I think I will end there. One last thing is probably that I'm harping on Peter Thiel today because I think he is, as I said, I don't just throwing it in there. I don't necessarily agree with him on everything. He has some controversial ideas that I don't have any argument for or against. I don't know if it's right or true, but one thing I think is really right about is that he says that learned helplessness is kind of what he is getting at, and I don't really like to use that phrase because it can sound somewhat arrogant towards people who are not doing something special, and but it's sort of a condition that I think is natural to people to just don't really think they can do something special, but we are way too risk averse, I would argue. But even more importantly, says that positive thinking is not enough, and negative thinking is definitely enormously powerful. And because if you think you can do something, you will do it. If you think you can't, you won't. So yeah, it's really dangerous to think that you can do something and keeping the motivation up, because even though not even positive thinking will get you there, but negative thinking will destroy you, really. And of course you should be realistic to some extent, or you should, not to some extent, you should probably be realistic most of the time, but you still really have to believe that you can achieve something, because otherwise you won't achieve anything. I think that's a given. So yeah, just wanted to mention that, because I think everyone who tries to do something different, and really anyone who, I think it's quite general for life, that you have to have a motivating picture or motivating attitude towards life. It's so damn essential. I think it's, and I partly saying this to remind myself of the importance of it, because it's really, really easy to get stuck in ideas that are destructive and that are not really getting you anywhere, and especially are demotivating. But at the same time, some things are hard to meet. Like, for example, if you really try to evaluate reality and be honest with yourself, you might identify things that are troubling, but you have to have a mindset that is solution oriented, not makes you worried. All these challenges is meant to be, I think it's quite a cliche almost to say that you shouldn't see problems, you should see solutions. But the inherent problem of seeing problems and actually trying to fix something is that you will find things that are not good and that need fixing. And so the process is really, in the process you have to not perceive the challenges and the obstacles as something that will impede, I think that's a word, will hinder your ability to get forward. It's actually something that I guess you should be thrilled to solve it. And easier said than done, but I think it's really, really, really important. Yeah, that will be, I'll keep it under 1 hour. So yeah, goodbye and see you next time.